Hello Dragon Wisps, welcome to today's video. Today we'll be doing part 2 of the 3.5 edition Dungeons & Dragons skills tutorial. I apologize for not using the same angle as I did with the last video, but I wanted to get this recorded for you so we can get right underway. Before I begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet so that you can become a Dragon Wisp. And if you'd like to support the channel more directly, you can do so at the Patreon and shop links, both in the description below. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and let's go over the skills some more, shall we? Alright, so the last time we went over using skills, skill synergies, and everything like that. So this time, we're going to go over actual skills, like the skills and what they do. We're going to go over the skill name, its function, how long it takes, so how many actions it takes, and whether or not you can get a repeat attempt, as well as any special additions, racial bonuses and things like that. So the first skill is appraise. It's pretty straightforward. So you're making your check to appraise the value, the function, the workmanship, the craftsmanship on an item. This can be anything from a special coin to a hidden door, things like that. Obviously, it can't be used to detect a hidden door, but to check the craftsmanship of it. You can also use a magnifying glass to give you a +2 bonus, or circumstance bonus, to your appraise check for small items like a gem. And then a merchant scale can give you a +2 circumstance bonus on appraising anything that's valued by weight, like gold, platinum, things like that. Your difficulty, obviously it increases depending on the rarity of it. Like an exotic item could be 20 or higher. For those of you that don't recall, I believe I went over this. DC is your difficulty class, so it determines how high of a number you need to roll in your check to pass the check. Praising an item takes 1 minute, which is 10 consecutive full round actions. We'll go into actions further in, at a different time. But I will say that a full round is essentially 6 seconds, and that time span actually exemplifies how much can happen in 6 seconds. You don't get to try again if you fail, and special things are dwarves get a +2 bonus on anything related to stone or metal items because they're dwarves and they're familiar with these items, especially stone or metal. The Master of a Raven Familiar gets a +3 bonus on appraise checks, and a character with the Diligent feat gets a +2 bonus on appraise checks. Alright, the next skill is balance. This one should be obvious, but it's your ability to balance. For example, you're walking a tightrope, a slippery edge, an uneven floor. Picture Link in Legend of Zelda walking along a ledge on a wall. The size of the area, narrow surface or a difficult surface, will affect your DC. So if you've got like 7 to 12 inches of space, it's a 10. 2 to 6 is 15. If you've got an area less than 2 inches wide, it's at least a 20. and there are modifiers that can be added to that. You know, if you're lightly obstructed, severely obstructed, slippery, you know, this will add to the DC. And of course, there is the DM's discretion as to whether or not they want to add a bit more. Things like uneven flagstone, a hewn stone floor, or sloped or angled floor will give you a 10 to your balance DC if you're running or charging. If you fail by 4 or less, you can't run or charge, but you may otherwise act normal. And of course, those can once again be affected by the surface modifiers. If you're attacked while you're balancing, you're considered flat-footed, so you don't get your dexterity bonus unless you've got 5 or more ranks in balance. Then you aren't considered flat-footed. If you're damaged, you need to make another flat-footed or another balance check. If you try to walk quickly across one of these surfaces, you take a -5 to your check, which can be unfortunate. As far as actions, it doesn't require any actions to do it. It's essentially just a free action. If you have the agile feat, you get a +2 bonus on your balance checks. Now, the next skill we cover is Bluff, which should be straightforward. This is your ability to lie. Essentially, you know, the halfling rogue acts as though he's really a halfling fighter. And then there are situations where you can just say, oh no, I'm a human, I'm just short. This is made against your opponent's sense motive check, which will have different effects. So if the target wants to believe you, it's a -5 to their sense motive. If it's believable and doesn't really affect the target, there's no penalty or bonus. If the bluff's a little hard to believe, but it puts the target to some risk, there's a +5 on their sense motive. If it's hard to believe, or if it puts them at significant risk, it's a +10. Or if the bluff is basically, there's no way someone will believe it, their sense motive check gets a +20. So, you know, use it wisely. You wouldn't walk up to an orc as an elf and tell them, oh, no, I definitely belong in this all-orc club. Their sense motive skill would be too high against your bluff, unless you're really, really good at lying. The amount of actions it takes can vary. A lot of DMs that I've played with will say, well, you know, if you're just lying, just lie. But sometimes it takes a bit of time to extravagate that lie. You know, there's a whole story behind it. Let me tell you what happened. Or, like, you know, if you're being questioned by the paladins, for example. You do have the ability to try again, depending on the situation. Generally, it makes them too... Like, if you're using bluff on somebody, it generally makes them a little too suspicious of you to believe you. However, you can also use bluff in combat to do a feint attack, in which case you would roll your bluff check again each time you attempt to feint. The next skill there are a couple special things here. The ranger gains a bonus on bluff checks against its favorite enemy, which we've gone over before. The master of a snake familiar gains a +3 on bluff, and if you have persuasive feat, you get a +2 bonus on bluff. Now, climb. Pretty straightforward. Climbing. Of course, depending on the situation, this can be more perilous than other times. Like if you're just trying to, let's say, climb a wall and you fall down, if you're not very high up, it's not going to be too much of an issue. However, if you're trying to climb up the side of a cliff or anything like that, chances are you're a little high up, it's going to hurt. So I'll give you some examples of climb DCs you would go against. So 0, a slope that's just too steep to just walk up, or a knotted rope with a wall to brace against. So you're not too worried. That you can take 10. You're good to go. 5 is for a rope with a wall to brace against, or a knotted rope, or a rope affected by the rope trick spell. Now in this case, the knotted rope isn't against a wall, so you're hand over hand climbing. 10 would be surfaces with ledges to hold on to and stand on, such as a very rough wall or a ship's rigging. You're climbing up the little rope rigging all the way up there. Doesn't happen very often in my experience, but there are DMs who will run aquatic campaigns, in which case you'd probably have some ships. In fact, I'd say the odds are very high. 15 would be a surface with adequate handholds and footholds, natural or artificial, such as very rough natural rock, or a tree, or an unknotted rope, or pulling yourself up when dangling by your hands. So I mean, this is that would purely be just strength at that point. I mean, you'd have your climb your climb check, but that you're relying a lot on strength. 20 would be an uneven surface with some narrow handholds and footholds, such as, general wall in the dungeons or a ruin. Basically trying to grab into the grouting. 25 would be a rough surface, such as a natural wall, rock wall, or a brick wall, do some rock climbing, or an overhang or ceiling with handholds but no footholds. So, picture the monkey bars at school, but much more complex. Now, there are further DCs at DM's discretion. However, something like a perfectly smooth, flat vertical surface cannot be climbed unless, again, of course, you've got a knotted rope to help you or something. In that case, you send whichever party member can fly up there and they can secure a rope. Alright, so a couple of things that will affect the climb DC modifier. Let's say you're climbing a chimney where you can brace yourself against opposite walls. It will reduce the DC by 10, because you're basically just climbing up, shimmying. -5 would be if you're climbing a corner where you can brace against perpendicular walls. And then something where the surface is slippery would add 5 to your DC. The action would generally be a part of a move action, because it's primarily involving movement. If you're trying to catch someone from falling or catch yourself from falling, it doesn't use that move action because that's more of a reaction. And then special, you can use a rope to haul a character upward through sheer strength. You can lift double your maximum load. So let's say the halfling wizard is not very good at climbing. No strength. Tie a rope to your waist, tie a rope to the wizard, climb. Obviously your DC will increase because you've got that added weight, but you can do up to double your maximum weight that way. Halfling wizard was a poor example because halflings get a +2 on climb checks. A master of a lizard familiar gains a +3 on climb checks. If you have the athletic feat, you gain a +2 on climb checks, and creatures with a climb speed have a +8 racial bonus on all climb checks. This would be things that crawl on walls. Yeah. Moving along. Concentration. concentration is focus, obviously. There are things like casting a spell or concentrating on an active spell, directing a spell, things like that. This require concentration. And generally, if something happens that would break your concentration, you know, taking damage, being distracted by someone else's spell, vigorous motion, you know, riding a horse, being entangled, things like this would affect your concentration check DC. But I don't have too much detail on that, as mentioned before, I don't use magic users. Alright, craft is our next skill. Craft is special because craft, when you take craft as a skill, as you can see here on the character sheet, craft has 3 spots. You need to take craft for, like, you need to specialize. So let's say arrow making, armor smithing, things like that. And then you have, obviously you have different DCs depending on what you're trying to do. You can make masterwork things if your check is that high above the DC. It's usually like at least double. Some examples of what you need. Oh, here we go. You can make a masterwork item. You create the masterwork component as a separate item in addition to the standard item. Okay. Craft is something that has a lot of detail in it, but long story short, you take something and you make it into something else, which is where the masterwork would require another component, which costs more money for materials. But masterwork items usually sell for more. High quality. Alright, so now some examples of items and what the craft skill you would use would be. So acid, alchemist fire, smoke stick, tinder twig, antitoxin, sun rod, things along those lines would be craft alchemy. Armor or shield obviously would be armor smithing. Longbow, short bow, composite longbow, composite short bow, composite longbow with high strength rating would be bow making. We'll go into strength rating on composite bows later. Crossbow, simple melee or thrown weapon, martial melee or thrown weapon, exotic melee or thrown weapon would be weaponsmithing. Mechanical trap would be trap making. And then other things, you know, like very simple items like wooden spoon, typical items like an iron pot, high quality items like a bell, complex or superior items like a lock. Those would be varying skills. That's up to your DM's discretion. You know, some might say, no, if you want to make locks, you need to take the locksmithing skill, like craft skill, you know, things like that. The next skill we're going to cover is Decipher Script. This is your ability to read ancient runes, letters in an infernal language, read directions on a treasure map written in a forgotten alphabet. You know, basically just read things that generally you or the other party members wouldn't be able to just snap your fingers and read. So actions, deciphering the equivalent of a single page of script takes 1 minute, which again as before is 10 consecutive full rounds. You don't get to try again, because obviously if you can't decipher it, you don't understand it. And a character with the diligent feat gets a +2 bonus. So the next and last skill we're going to go over in this video, unfortunately this is taking a while, is diplomacy. This is your ability to persuade people to make them your friends. convince people to do something that they normally wouldn't do, which would obviously increase the DC. You know, if you go to a guard and try to convince him to walk away from his post, it's going to be a bit of a high DC, because obviously that's going to be harder to do. You can try again. It's not usually recommended because retries don't often work, but like I said, you're welcome to try, which is one of the things you never want to hear your DM say. But alas. And half-elves get a +2 racial bonus, and if you have the negotiator feat, you also get a +2. So if you have a half-elf that has the negotiator feat, that's a +4. Not too shabby if you ask me, especially at low levels. Alright, so that covers the skills we're going to cover in this video. I hope you join me for the next one. Thank you for joining me as we cover the first portion of the skills, which is the second skill video. I didn't quite expect it to run as long, or like as long as it did, but going into detail with these skills is probably more educational than not. So, you know, we didn't actually get very far in the skills. It's unfortunate. So this is going to be at least a couple more videos. I do apologize for that, but I hope you'll bear with me. So, thank you again for joining me. Right about now, you should be getting the usual subscribe button up here, latest video on the channel over here, video recommended for you by YouTube over here, and over here will be the Dungeons & Dragons tutorial playlist. So, again, thank you for joining me, and as always, have a peaceful day. Bye.